amazing. I don't feel like doing this now. Whoa. Yeah, that was just incredible. Amazing. And it opens us. Are you open? Because we need to be. Too much is going on in our world that is causing us to be confused, to question, to doubt, to want to just take a long nap. But the world is calling, and it is the amazing grace that when we allow ourselves to open, and to really open, and to have the eyes to see what is before us, what is the higher call, we are the ones that are being called. So your song is so perfect, so much sang from the soul of who you are and the soul of what this teaching is about. The topic for the whole month is open communication. And so there's conversations that we must have. There's conversations that are hard, but they're conversations we must bring our voice to, bring our heart to, bring our understanding to, but not bring our judgments or our opinions to. And that's the challenge, because we've already kind of paved the way with my way or no way, or my way works better than that person's way. So for the last several years, there has been, and months, there's been something out there that we keep pointing to. It's that fault, or it's something over there, or it's that politician, or no, it's that group of people. So we're pointing, but all the while there's this stirring inside of us of something's not exactly right. And so what is that a call to? It's a call to communicate to that, and from that place to find your answers. So Reverend Ken Gordon reminds us with this opening idea for this topic today. We stand together in a shared commitment and devotion to our spiritual principles, practices, and values. We communicate openly with each other in an atmosphere of collaboration, and here it is, inclusion. There's so many times when we come up against something that just rubs us the wrong way, and we just want to discount it or not look at it, not turn our heart towards it. But here we are. And I love how he stated in a little video clip that he prepares all of the centers to find their way with some of these topics. And he said, this is the evolutionary time of our teaching. That's powerful. We've had the teaching. Oh, the wisdom goes back, clear back to the times of the Greek philosophers, and through Reverend Mary's talk last week, she pointed to the different ways that these wisdoms have come down into our heart. And now, here we are, we're called to take it forward and to evolve. This is what's going on in our world, to evolve it into something greater. A greater good is always unfolding, and we stand at the doorway of that. I loved the way, the reading of the way, thank you, Damien, because it talks about this path that we're on. And sometimes don't we just want to lay down and just say, oh, it's too much, let me take a nap. But the shadows fall upon us and our heart is stirred and we wake up. And when we wake up, there's an awakening inside of us, a stirring, a charge that is asking us to be the vehicle, to be the instrument, to be the one that is answering the call. So grace and racism. The words merge together and become Gracism. And the author of this book is a very powerful Christian minister, Christian pastor. His name is David A. Anderson, and he is the founder and the senior pastor of Bridgeway Community Church, one of the nation's leading multicultural churches located in Columbia, big city, Columbia, Maryland, actually. His previous books include Letters Across the Divide and Multicultural Ministry. Why do I share that? Because I found so much from this book. I realized as I opened it, one of my little oh, there's a lot of Bible stuff in here. And I found myself going, I must stay awake to what is he saying to me here? I am such a person that loves the Bhagavad Gita. And when I open the Bible, I'm going, I don't get it. And I'm always feeling guilty because Jesus says, for those that have eyes and ears to hear will get it. And I'm thinking, I don't get it. I need somebody else to tell me what they just said. So he does that beautifully through a passage of 1 Corinthians. And it's about, the scripture itself is all about we are one body. And he talks about no more important is the eye than the ear. You know that, you guys know that one, right? Oh yeah, everybody nods. It's powerful because he's using it, Paul is the one writing that scripture, but he uses it to let us know we are one people, one body, one, and no more is more important than the other. So racism defined by one person says, speaking or acting or thinking negatively about someone else solely based on their color, their class, or their culture. David Anderson says it cannot be fully explained as an expression of being prejudiced alone. It's a system involving cultural messages and institutional policies and practices, as well as the beliefs and the actions of different individuals. What is grace? Grace is the unmerited favor of God on humankind, and he takes that word, grace, and merges it with race and finds that if you put God first, it becomes gracism. So the answer to all of the disruption of your heart, if you have any at all, even the smallest pebble, a grain of sand that's rubbing your heart wrong, where you recognize, ooh, I just closed down, ooh, there's a homeless person that, ooh, there's another political party that, ooh, what is it? What is it? What is yours? And put God before it. I spoke in the 9 o'clock service. This all reminds me of, and I want to take you there, is to that field, which Rumi talks about, right? The field beyond right and wrong. We have our opinions. We have our influence from times that we've been hurt by another race or another culture. You've had that experience. I'm not trying to diminish that. There was a patient I had a couple weeks ago that her husband was so angry with the Vietnamese still at this time. And she shared with me that he is so prejudiced, so hateful, that she's been married to him for 30, 40 years, but it breaks her heart. She can't break through that hate. And yet, for her mother, the only caretaker she could find was a young little Vietnamese nurse. And in the dying deathbed, he embraced her. And I just found that, I just sat there with her story, and she went on, but I'm like, that is amazing grace. That it takes that moment where we hold so strong to our belief, and he has reasons to have that belief, but to be willing to yield into the one I love, to yield into that. It's a powerful song that we opened our service with. It's a celebration of, I'm asking us all to lean into that, to go to that field as you listen with ears from that field, not from the experience that you've already had, not from the belief that you have so polished and found yourself in group discussions, spouting your wisdom or your opinion. Go beyond all of that and listen with those ears. Reverend Ellen Grace O'Brien says, grace is the surrender of the sense of separation, does not mean the extinction of the individual. It means divine action. Grace is flowing freely without the conflict of a self-will. Ernest Holmes says, grace is the givingness of spirit to its creation. It's not a special law, but a specialized one. In other words, grace is. But we need not to recognize it. It's not something that God will impose upon us, but it is a logical result of the correct acceptance of life and a correct relationship to spirit. This is the invitation today, to walk with a correct relationship to spirit out in our world. We have been saved by grace to the extent that we believe in, accept, and seek to embody the law of good. The law of good is the law of liberty and never one of limitation. Limitation is a belief of a thing or an entity. Freedom, Ernest Holmes says, is a divine reality. So Gracism and racism, as I speak these words, just watch what you bump into along the way and where you can lift yourself to see it from a greater point of view. Jesus says, empty yourself and I will fill thee. This is the consciousness that you are invited to embrace today. You want to be possessed by this mystical knowing, this purpose, this guidance, this release from any expectation of how it's going to be. You want to live in faith and be devoted to this inner work that's being called for you to surrender to. As Carolyn Mace's invitation there, God, that you are ready as an unwilling servant to experience what few others can understand. So Jesus spoke to this many times in his writings, and I was stirred a few years ago when I went to the World Parliament of Religion. What I loved about that was the multicultural, the diversity, the beauty, and thousands of people contained within a dome-like place at the Salt Lake City Convention Center. Everybody with diverse ideas and opinions, strong women, minded women out there yapping their thing too, and everybody was getting along. Everybody was inviting people into the conversation. You left like a world that got along, a world that works for all. You felt it in that Salt Lake City Convention Center. It's coming up again in Canada in 2018, so I invite you to watch for that, World Parliament of Religions, something that is an event of the lifetime. I've done a lot of wonderful things. That tops it all. That woke me up. But during that conference, that's when Black Lives Matters was really coming in to play. And I was feeling suddenly the stain of white privilege. And I didn't know what to do with it. I thought, I'm so white. And I've gotten a comfort zone in my whiteness, and I had never really thought about it. And yet I was listening to the tales of the other races speak to what experience they've had. And this book starts off with his story. He's a black pastor, and he starts off this story. It's so powerful. Here he is, starting, a beautiful man. He speaks of his childhood in here as well, and he had all of the horrific things, the bullying that can happen when you're a different race in a school. He had all of that stuff, but he had a father that was wise and told him never to react with anger, but to react with love. So he had this in his heart. And so he recognized he was a tall African-American male. And he says, my new reality as a Willow employee placed me in a suburban context among a sea of white people. The context included beautifully designed mansions and shiny luxury vehicles that occupied multiple garages. The landscape lawns were works of art religiously primped and usually cared for by Hispanic men who edged and mowed the well-manicured acreage. It was a far cry from the urine-stained elevators and graffiti-ridden projects of Cambrini. I wasn't raised in either extreme. I didn't come from wealth or poverty. Both my parents worked full-time jobs. But he goes on to say, heading for Chicago was a big deal for him because I had seldom traveled beyond the Washington metropolitan area. My home metropolis was demographically diverse, and there everyone seemed to work hard to hold on to their jobs, pay their mortgage, and protect their family from the social ills of drugs and violence. When I landed in Chicago, though, the extremes of racial existence were stark. It seemed as if the majority of whites were rich and educated, while the blacks were poor and uneducated. The Hispanics were in their own enclaves, and the Asians were seemingly invisible except in Chinatown and Koreatown. For me as a minister in my 20s, my views about diversity, class distinction, social conditioning, racial reconciliation were challenging my vision for multicultural ministry amid the extremes of society. So here he is driving through in his first morning there. I commuted to my church in my rusted out old blue Honda Civic. I noticed blue lights were flashing in my rearview mirror. A police officer was signaling me, pull over. With my hands in clear view, I gave the officer my license and registration. He went back to his vehicle. I assumed he was checking my information for the computer and doing whatever else police officers do in their cars while they stop a driver who sits in embarrassment along the side of the road as motorists pass by and gawk. When the officer returned to my driver's side window, he handed me my license, and I was dismissed. Before you leave, sir, can you please tell me why I was pulled over? The officer responded, you fit the description of someone we're looking for. So I took him for his word. Had that been my only experience being pulled over that day, I would have believed that inconvenience of mistaken identity could happen to anyone. But a few hours later, as I drove off the church campus to get lunch, again, I had the sinking feeling in my stomach that comes with the realization that you're being stopped again by a police officer. What's wrong now? I said aloud to myself. Bad luck indeed, I thought. Like it was deja vu, I went through the same delay that had made me on the first day of work earlier that morning. I received from the second officer the same explanation given to me by the first. You fit the description of someone we're looking for. At this point, I thought it would be great if the officers could make a note in their systems to let everyone know that David Anderson was not the guy that they were looking for, and I was starting to get upset. What made the day memorable was not the orientation to one of the coolest mega churches I'd ever been exposed to at the time, or the grace for which the staff greeted me. What was most memorable was that I was tardy on my first day as an intern due to the delay from a police officer. The day is memorable because I was stopped again on my way to lunch. But at the end of the story, we could record the scenario as a minor inconvenience. I was stopped by a third officer before the day was over, and I was stopped by a fourth. 3 male, 1 female, all were white. I never received a ticket, harsh treatment, thankfully. 4 times being pulled over in one day. Wow. And it's profiling, right? So his idea with all of this is to take it, and his church is built. He's got a huge ministry of connecting multicultural ways to bring understanding, to bridge understanding, and to help us all understand what we're up against here in this field. So he takes that scripture, 1 Corinthians, and he speaks to it in such a way that he helps to take us down into a pathway of understanding what tools that we can use from Scripture, from the way of Jesus' wisdom and teaching to move through some of these disturbing situations. He also explained that we all have these, he describes it as a red dot experience. His was being black in a community of predominantly white in this particular area. But how many times have you had, they did this experiment with 10 people that they put a dot on their cheek, and then they had to go in for an interview. It's called the red dot experiment. 5 out of the 10 people had the actual red dot. 5 didn't. All 10, though, said that the person interviewing couldn't stop staring at their dot. Interesting, right? Psychologically, they got embarrassed, self-conscious. And I think each one of us have had a self-conscious experience within our who we are. And so we've all had a red dot experience. What's yours? Some of them are so silly. I had a patient once, they did a skin graft. I thought this was not right. They put the nipple on his cheek. You can imagine that. I'm sitting there talking to him with this, he had a nipple on his cheek. And I thought, why? I said to him, why did they do that? Because that was the way they did it in those days. And he said, it's been hard. I mean, how do you not look at that? You're just like, okay, you've got a nipple on your cheek. But then it goes away when you get to know the person. But, that I digress on that. But there's these moments of, we've all had these experiences. So what you ask yourself as I speak, what's your red dot? Sometimes they're bright and noticeable, and other times they're things that you can just feel self-conscious about and keep hidden. But notice where you feel insecure out in your world. And his invitation is for us to recognize how much our world is racialized. And how sometimes we feel unsafe out in the world. And how sometimes these red dots experiences are making us feel unwanted and limited in our success, in our way, in our smooth transition out into the world. Well, here's where Gracism comes in. This is where he's coined that, put God first. What would God do? And when you put God first, love comes first. And love flows effortlessly into the channel of all experiences. And your heart is washed clean. Listen to that amazing grace. Your heart is washed clean. Putting God, putting that G first in front of racism. Put God first, whatever you're feeling. Put it in front of any negative thought. Put God first. 1 Corinthians, he said, see the beauty in diversity and celebrate it. One of the first key points of one of the first phrases that he speaks to in that passage is you treat people with special honor. So remember all the body parts, no one part is better than the other. No one is indispensable. Being a lifter to others' lives, make sure you serve others in a manner that is received by them as honoring them, not perceived as honoring only from your perspective. Those are the author's words. Don't do things more to your liking. Ask questions. Find where the comfort zone really is. Ask for the best way. The second one he speaks to in that parable is special modesty. And he says, he paraphrases it, I will cover you. Therefore, he speaks, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly beloved, clothe yourself, cover yourself. With what? With compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Clothe yourself. I will cover you. If you see someone suffering, I will cover you. Cover you with what? With my compassion, with my kindness, with my humility, with my gentle heart, with my patience. Let me understand before I judge. Take into the account of another's vulnerability. Try to walk in their shoes, so to speak. Ensure another's dignity. Make sure you're not just doing something to expose a greater weakness or another vulnerability. Help others to look and feel their best. I will cover you. Special modesty. No special treatment I will share with you. In Corinthians, Paul gets upset with those not because they have privilege and luxury at home, but because their failure to commune with the less fortunate. He states the art of inclusion by saying, so then, my brothers, when you come together and eat, wait for each other. He speaks to entitlement here. And he speaks in such a beautiful way, I don't want to pass this moment and not share. I'm getting the high sign back there, but he said, therefore it is my Christian responsibility, which is different from my inalienable right as a human being, to refuse upgrades in the face of my brother and sister. I must either help the unpresentable ones to upgrade with me or share with them in their experience of lack. Otherwise, here it is, otherwise I may get seduced by entitlements and become addicted to the prestige that comes with power, all of which can be gained on the blacks or in the face of others who don't have the same insider information and networks that I have been afforded. We can ride on privilege. We can ride on that, and we can forget that we can share. I will share with you. The fourth one, he speaks to that parable, I will honor you. I will honor you. Honor you. A greater honor. The banquet table. Not rushing to take the first seat, but to open up the space and allow others to fill that seat first, to partake of the food first before you get your own. Can we do that? Can we allow ourselves to pick your place at the table and not be the one that has to sit as the honored one? Many times in retreats, one of the things that has always touched my heart is Dr. James used to wait, and he was always the last one to eat as we went through the food line. That always impressed me, because we're all hungry, almost grouchy hungry at retreats, but he waited. He waited, and he sat wherever there was a seat left. Honoring. I will stand by you, no division. I have to tell you this quick story. How important we are to each other. How important the elders are to the younger. To show the way, to be the ones to ask for that respect, to be listened to. They did this white rhino experiment. The white rhino was going extinct, and they thought the villages were killing the white rhino. You know who was killing them? Were the baby elephant, the adolescent elephants, because there was such an abundance of big elephants that they were being, like deer, hunted. And the adolescents were just running wild. And they didn't know it wasn't right to kill a rhino. So they had to then bring back some adult elephants to school the adolescents. So we're being asked to be the wise ones, to school. There is a wisdom out in nature, and if we look out there, we follow that, and we find our understanding with one another, following nature. I will stand with you, no division. I will consider you equal concern. Now here's where I must have you listen just a little longer. The Good Samaritan story. Which side of the street are you on? Because this is the story in his work that grabbed me the most. The Good Samaritan story. Jesus told the story of a man lying on the side of the road, having been beaten by the robbers and left for dead. A priest witnessed the man's downtrodden state. A priest. And yet, he chose to cross the road and walk down the other side of the street without helping him. After the priest got as far from the helpless man as possible, a Levite, another kind of religious leader of the day, also passed the man who had been mugged. Like the priest, the Levite passed by on the other side of the road to avoid contact with the man, absolving him of responsibility and leaving the victim for someone else to help. Finally, a third man encountered the downtrodden soul lying on the ground. This man was the Samaritan, one who was racially mixed with Jewish blood, and the Samaritan took pity on the man. His concern for the hurt man drove him to action. He bandaged the victim's wounds, poured oil and wine on him. He then picked up the man and placed him on his donkey, escorting him to the local inn, where he invested his own resources to assure that the victim's stay was paid for. The Samaritan did 3 things that underscored the point about loving one's neighbor that is being taught here. First, the Samaritan took pity. And do we? Are we taking pity? Too many conversations about what to do with the mentally ill and the homeless. One thing I want to shout out to Reverend Mary. When we started doing the Shoes for Souls, the bins were out there and we're going, oh, they're stinky. They're messy. Where can we put them that they won't be seen? She says, no, they need to be front and center. We need not to forget. That really, Mary, was powerful. Because you walk past that and you remember. You remember what we're here to do, help one another. She took pity. So the first thing, took pity on the downtrodden man. This means he had a merciful heart. Second, the Samaritan took action by bandaging the wounds and escorting him to a safe place. Shepherding heart. He demonstrated a shepherding heart. The third act of love by the Samaritan was to invest in the healing of the victim by paying the innkeeper for the time of the inn and offering additional money. The generous heart. He gave. He gave of his own finances, his own good. Jesus taught in that parable for us to love with active compassion. So the author, describes the times. He feels the conviction of God's Spirit in this writing. He understands the way. He looks at the fringes of society. And he too shares moments where he disappoints himself by walking on the other side of the street. I take other outlets when I see there's a beggar on the corner. I'm one of those that finds another way. I can't sometimes look into the eye of suffering. I might make up the story, oh, they're going to buy cigarettes or dope. I don't know. Who's it to me to even say? If I've got change there, why can't I hand it to them? I don't know what this answer is, but I want to walk that greater walk. I want us as a society to look at the fringes of what's going on here. I feel like I was sharing with somebody, our thoughts have helped create this when we started watching those Star Wars movies when we were kids, and they had that underground yucky people. They were greasy and sweaty, and they had eye here and a big ear, and but they're hidden, the hidden part of yucky society. And I remember we were all so disturbed, but I feel like, our thoughts are powerful. Now we created this society out here of the untouchables in our own country. And yet, when you spend time and talk to one of the homeless, it is their family. I want to shout out to Reverend Pam for continuing with the Hope Van and feeding and having that opportunity to come together to have conversation, not to be better than, but to share a meal, to break bread together. We have opportunity here to serve. But he writes, I confess, Great Spirit, I'm not gracist enough. I seek isolation and protection from the ills of society, which includes the people who go with those ills. These are the people whom Christ was seeking to hang out with and touch. Yet in my world of a cul-de-sac living, a garage door that opens and closes, a back deck that has a mountaintop retreat setting, I can shut out the undesirables whose pain is too much for me to bear. Would you please pause with me for a prayer of confession and forgiveness? What a heart. May we be forgiven for the unskillful ways. And he ends that passage by saying, I celebrate with you and I rejoice with you. To allow ourselves, whatever it be, whatever the uncomfortableness is out there into the world, whatever you see, whatever diversity, whatever, we don't have to look very far. But remember, we're looking at it from that field. We're not separated. It's not right or wrong. We are one. And so I invite you to join me in a prayer, remembering as you leave here today, where can I place God first and allow Gracism to fill my heart? for those most uncomfortable moments where the world is tugging me to wake up, to be on my path, to be the way shore. May I be in a community that allows others to wake up to this deep inner call. The golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Join with me. There is only love in this field, in this space, in this heart. Only love. And as we allow our hearts to be stretched, tugged, awakened, we see the joy, we see the pain, and we move with grace. And we allow our actions to be blessed by grace. We allow our way to be a way that heals and lifts others up. And in so doing, we lift ourselves up. And we lean into the wisdom of the Scriptures in such a way that if we've lost our way, we stand and find a partner to point the way. And we go on. This is the evolution of our teaching. This is the evolution of our heart. This is the world calling to us in all its ways. Wake up and be a part of the love that heals, the grace that moves. No responsibility on being the one that has to have it turn out a certain way, but only staying true to the deep heart, the deep love, the deep invitation that may all beings be peaceful and well. May all beings, the privileged, ourselves, those in between, those on the fringes, may we understand and may we operate from a place that allows love to transform all that is before us. And most importantly, we take this opportunity to forgive ourselves for walking on the other side of the street, for turning away. We take a breath. And we reach out to the hand near us, to the heart nearest, and we say, join me. We're going to make a difference. We're going to make a difference. Join me. Eyes open, hearts moving, action, sacred duty. I give thanks for the hearts in this room, for the wisdom, for the service to humanity that I know has existed in this room through your hearts. This is a powerful, powerful moment for us to face what is true, what is real. Thank you, God, as we humble our way and continue to walk our talk. So be it, and so it is. Thank you.